Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming to the second annual Ruggero Piano Teacher Workshop Series. Today is the second of our three-part series, and we are featuring Dr. Barbara Lister-Sink. You will find two things on the website, on the Ruggero website, helpful. One is her biography, which you can read at your leisure, and if they're not up now, they will be in a few minutes, a set of handouts for you to print at home at your leisure after the program, where you can really also get some information and lasting information in addition to your own note-taking. It's with pleasure that I introduce Barbara Lister-Sink.
Thank you so much, Carol. What a pleasure to be here. In these strange times, I hope you don't mind if I have a little coffee in hand. I'm here to talk about injury-preventive technique, among other things, but I wish my dog had understood injury-preventive foot technique, because you'll see, if you can see me, I'm a little asymmetrical. This morning I broke my right foot, so it's my pedal foot, but I'm doing all right. I'll play for you just a little bit, and I can still use it. So it's a joy to be here. I need to read you a poem right off the bat so you'll know how I feel, talking to a little tiny lens right there with a few lovely folks here keeping me company. Knowing that I'm connecting with you somehow. I hope I can find it here. I had it drawn up on my, it's a poem by Walt Whitman. And when I did my first concert, April 24th during COVID, I had a tiny little iPhone and I was looking at it the same way I'm looking at you and envisioning you there. So in order to help for me to envision that you're here this morning, I'll read it to you. It's called A Noiseless Patient Spider by Walt Whitman. A noiseless patient spider I marked, where on a little promontory it stood isolated. Marked how to explore the vacant, vast surrounding. It launched forth filament, filament, filament out of itself, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. And you, O my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached, in measureless oceans of space, ceaselessly musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them, till the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor hold, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, O my soul. So today I'm going to be flinging a gossamer thread to you out there, one and all, and somehow I do feel connected with you. And I'm hoping that during this presentation, you will feel free to enter some questions if you have them, and we'll take a little bit of a break halfway through the presentation, and I will field questions, because the last thing I want to do is be confusing, and I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. And I also want to say at the outset that I know I'm speaking with all sorts of really wonderful, experienced, wise, and terribly knowledgeable and successful teachers and pianists and whoever else is out there. But whatever I have to say to you is just to help in some way. And as I said, if it's not clear, please ask your questions. And there will be a handout, but you don't need it now. And Carol will be sending that out to you after the workshop. So without further ado, what I'd like to do, since we're all musicians and we're here actually ultimately to make beautiful music and to help our students make compelling music and to enjoy the experience, I will start playing with a few little things on this gorgeous Bösendorfer, and I'm delighted to be here at Ruggero's Piano Company. It's just absolutely beautiful here just to be surrounded by gorgeous pianos, and actually to be out of Winston-Salem, where we just had Zeta blow through, and I'm without power, so we've been without now for a day or so. So it's just a joy to be here with electricity, and also to be surrounded by beautiful pianos and lovely people. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with a little Bach prelude, and then segue to a lovely posthumous Chopin etude. These are all very short. And then I will finish up. I haven't practiced it, so you'll see me practicing it with a Scriabin etude or prelude from Opus 11. The reason I'm doing this is to show you, in a way, just how we've expanded our reach, you might say, on the keyboard. When this prelude was composed, obviously it was played on harpsichord, and the keys were a little bit narrower, and the range of motion was narrower. Something that's very important as we think about today biomechanics, which just means good body use, basically. And then the Chopin begins, as you know. Chopin introduced much more of the arm, and so we are beginning to reach out, you might say, to further and further across the keyboard, and have to use more of our levers. If you think about the finger levers, the hand lever, the arm lever, forearm, and the big lever, the whole arm lever. And also then if you get to Scriabin, the last one, there's an awful lot of big, wide reaches because he's using the whole range of the keyboard just about. Or at least he does. I'm not sure if I will today, but we'll see. So wish me luck. So first, the Bach, and these are all very short. And I'm delighted also to be sitting on a beautiful bench that I've gotten 2 of these from Ruggero's. They're great for shorter people like me or people with short torsos or short from the waist up. So I can actually be high enough. Okay? I know, I'm a teacher. Take my jewelry off. No watches. And then we'll move along about 100, at least 100 or more years to Chopin. and on another 50 years or so. And this, by this point, the Bach would have been written for the harpsichord, which had certain size of keys, as you know. And the piano I just would have played on would have keys about this size, which are considerably smaller, not considerably, but a bit smaller than the nowadays piano. As Carol Leone, who's a real champion of the smaller keyboards, as am I, has written many times, very eloquently in fact, the standardized modern piano and the keyboard size was standardized around 1890, about the time when this Scriabin prelude was composed. And it was adapted, actually, for very large hands in America, for the Russian, Polish virtuosi, like Rachmaninoff, who came over and toured the land. And so they wanted a larger piano. So they would be playing on this size. And this is considerably smaller. The one that Chopin would have played on a Pleyel or an Aroid, quite a bit smaller. So we nowadays, speaking of good body use, are attempting, also with our much smaller hands than Rachmaninoff had, we are attempting to play on instruments that are actually quite a bit bigger than we should be playing this music on, if we have anything like a normal or a smaller hand, like most women do. So anyhow, I will be playing then, with my little hands, this Scriabin prelude for you. And you'll notice also how it really does use the whole width of the keyboard, more even than the Chopin. Taken me probably about 15 minutes of warming up to really play well, and I apologize if there were a few missed notes, but I was warming up in it, but it's not the piece one should warm up in because I was not stretched out enough, a little bit more in the hands, and the muscles warmed up a bit. But you can see it's even from that angle that it's much more demanding in terms of the amount of whole arm coordination it does take. So now what I'd like to do, without further ado, is get to a little PowerPoint that I've created that will give you some information. I believe in my teaching of injury-preventive technique and the program at Salem College, I believe that it's really important for teachers especially to understand just what we're doing rather than just do it well. Play with good coordination is wonderful, and a lot of people do play with really beautiful coordination. But I believe the reason the injury rate is so high in our field, and it's about 50% serious pianists will become injured in their lifetime, and that's an appalling rate. But I think one of the reasons for that is that even though we may have been taught it from our teachers, or you may have taught it, or you, of course, play this way, the problem is that we're not quite sure what we did. And so what I try to do is deconstruct it, dissect it a little bit, from a scientific viewpoint, i.e. biomechanics, anatomy, all that sort of thing, musician friendly, you might say, and then explain it to my students so they then can remember why they're doing what they're doing from a kind of a basic form viewpoint, like athletes, and then they can give it to their students, which they do, so that we can replicate these principles of good coordination. I find that really, really important to do. So I would like to then start with this, and I hope you're not put off by the term biomechanics. It's just forces, as the PowerPoint will show, the forces of the environment working on the body. It's like physics for the body. It's a lot of fun, actually. So here we go. Freeing the caged bird. Well, you all know that, but some of you may know that. That's my, that was my DVD. So I tried to just come up with healthful biomechanics as opposed to natural technique, relaxed technique, which it ain't. You know, if you play the piano, which all of you do, that you're not relaxed when you play, but you can be efficient and you can move well and move with ease. So that's my dad. I wish I had a photo of my mom. I don't have very many, but he was a great stride player. And as you can see, he has great alignment of the spine. Posture is wonderful. And his hands, if you can see them, it's a little shadowy. He has what I call a beautiful paw. His hands are just fantastic. They were. And he played all of his life, even when he went blind in his 70s. He played until he died at 97. And he played beautifully, but stride and ragtime. So he was sort of my model, as well as my mom. Biomechanics are nothing more than the study of how forces, internal and external, work on our body. The physics of the body. That's a good example of many centuries ago of how biomechanists kind of study these things, just to see how you load. If any of you actually go to the gym, which I do, I love weightlifting, then you know that form is incredibly important in terms of how we disperse the forces across our body. And in modern times, they have just billions of dollars, multi-billion-dollar industry for athletes to actually determine what is the right form. We don't have anything like that in the music world. Researchers have hundreds of thousands when sports researchers have millions, you might say, of grants. And a lot of the laws that I'm applying today when I'm explaining this to you have to do with gravity. It's a gravity-friendly instrument. That's the wonderful thing about it. Inertia, law of momentum, action, reaction, conservation of energy. Don't move when you don't need to. Especially, I love the momentum is we're constantly in flow. Muscles just love to keep going. They don't like to start and stop, because that takes more muscle energy. Athletes, coaches, therapists, occupational therapists, scientists, and performing arts medicine physicians have studied, perhaps, biomechanics. Not necessarily, they would study anatomy and physiology, but biomechanics is more in the sports world and physical therapy world and occupational therapy world. So when I took my own college biomechanics course, not that long ago, within the last decade, I was astonished at how I was surrounded by very young people, women at Salem, who were acing it with calculus and physics and all of that. And they were studying to become sports coaches. And the idea was to get certified so that when they did coach their young students, they would not harm them. They would know principles of good use and what they call in athletics basic form. They have that in golf. They have it in all the sports, in fact. And you can go and analyze your swing, and you can use motion analysis, which actually we can do very well now with Zoom teaching. I'm finding it easier to teach technique now because we have 3 camera angles set up, and I'm sure you're doing this too. It's kind of fun and creative, and I can zoom in and see every pore on their arm. Unfortunately, they can see every wrinkle in my face too, but that's beside the point. It's just something my ego has had to get over. But I found it very, very fruitful and it's creative. We're innovating. My students are kind of enjoying it too. We're trying to make the most of this very strange time, as I'm sure you are too. We use it in ergonomics. It's used to determine just the best seating arrangement, where the head will be if you have a collision, and what forces will be, external and internal, how those forces will impact your body. Why do we not study it, piano and organists? students? Well, because in my textbook, you might see something like that. Most musicians go into music not because they love science. I love science, but I love music, so I think they're not mutually exclusive. But most of our piano students, as you know, go into music, as we did, because we love the emotional pull on our heartstrings. We love to create those emotions in sound. And we don't want to think about the athletics or the form of it. But I think they actually can go very nicely together. We study it because it gives us, as I said earlier, an understanding, a rational understanding of what we're doing. I just wrote an article, finished an article entitled, this particular one was about the silent struggle of injured pianists. I finished it actually yesterday. And, but I've done another one recently. I may title it, Is There One Right Way to Play? Is there one correct technique? Well, I'll say to you today, before I get revved up for the next hour or so, that I think there is, but hear me out, here's my answer. The rule, just as in the medical profession, do no harm, first do no harm, the rule is do not stress the neuromusculoskeletal system. There are a whole lot of ways to play the piano and be extremely artistically expressive and musically creative without stressing the body. What I'm here today to talk about are core principles of biomechanics, things that we need to know so that we don't stress our body. And it's actually not just about my fingers, hands, and arm levers, it's about my entire body. And I've been blessed, by the way, with some wonderful training in the Alexander technique, so that informs a number of things that I'll talk about in terms of just the torso and the neck and the head relationship. I think it is terribly important to recognize risk factors. There are many risk factors besides good poor biomechanics. Genetics, you can have pre-existing conditions, arthritis, things that are non-playing related, but they actually do begin to impact our playing. So that's important to know. Hypermobility, I'll have a few images in a few moments. Hypermobility is another thing. It's genetic, and we strive in vain to teach our little students to keep that nice arch, and yet you can see the knuckles, those MCP joints just going, whoa, down, down, down. But we have little tricks of the trade that I'll share with you to show you what my students do with their young students, or with older students, with themselves. Because if they have serious hypermobility, that also can have actually a devastating effect on your ability to play. And that's one of the lesser known, shadowy conditions that haunts our profession, actually. And I think a good form, good biomechanics, helps us to remove impediments to our artistry. There's nothing like being able to warm up, which I wasn't able to do, so that impedes my artistry too. But my biomechanics, I was beginning to rev them up, you might say, as I was playing. We're artist athletes. I love this little image from my brother-in-law up in Edmonton, Alberta, years ago, but it just says it all about the the compatibility of the sciences and art. I do believe in that marriage. This is a quote worth reading so that you can all pat yourselves on the back. The most intricately and perfectly coordinated of all voluntary movements in the animal kingdom are those of the human hand and fingers. So congratulate your hand and fingers. And perhaps in no other human activity do memory, complex integration, and muscular coordination surpass the achievements of the skilled pianist. That was Dr. Homer Smith, who wrote Fish to Philosopher. He was a leading physiologist, and he obviously knew what he was talking about. We're sort of the darlings also of neuroscience, because our brains are so incredibly active when we are playing. As Pascal Leone, Elton Mueller McPherson, I won't bore you with a lot of research, but they have more or less advanced that piano playing is one of the most demanding activities known to humankind. A complete interaction of musculoskeletal, neuromuscular, and sensory motor systems. And we are artist athletes. And then this is what one study showed this, but it's almost frightening when you think about it, that playing advanced repertory, we've practiced our students, if we're in college and we get them, and some of you have very advanced students, if you're doing pre-college, 10,000 hours, that's a bit much. I added up what I thought little farm girl Barbara might have done, and I think it was about 5,000 or 6,000 before I went to college. That's a heck of a lot of time at the piano. An English major, a philosophy major, does not spend 6,000 hours reading Jane Austen or Plato. So we're kind of a different breed. We've already done a great deal by the time we get to college. Whether it's programming that we want or that maybe we don't want, some of which, that's another thing, but that's a lot of repetition. Sadly, and this is what those of us who work with injured pianists, and I'd say 60% of the pianists that I teach in the graduate program at Salem are injured, that doesn't diminish their motivation to practice. Just like this broken foot and the pain didn't diminish my motivation to keep walking. Whether it was good for it or not, I just kept going. And I think so many pianists are like that. But here's the kicker. The rate of playing-related injury worldwide is still extraordinarily high. If you had a 1 in 2 chance of not making it to your destination, you got on an airplane, you wouldn't fly that airline. If you knew a drug, you had a 1 in 2 chance of having serious physical problems, even death, you would not take that pill. I don't even know how to explain to you the heartbreak I see from this kind of shadow world that my students live in. And there are thousands and thousands of them suffering from anything from pain to then vocal dystonia, centralized pain syndrome, all sorts of things that these injuries, they become very, very complex. So some of our disorders, overuse and misuse, we know that. Misalignment, if we're sitting very poorly, that is impacting negatively our spine and the ability of our brain to send out signals through our central nervous system, through the nerves. And the accumulation of muscle tension, we all know what that feels like in here, inflamed tendons, entrapped nerves, just to name a few things. See, I keep coming back to other fields. Even in computer, not that anybody sits like this, but even in the computer world, we've got, this is how you're supposed to sit. And there are all those wonderful things that actually, that could be one of my students sitting at the piano. That's pretty much the same alignment. They would be moving much more side to side, but that's a wonderful alignment. If you can see the bottom one, this one went around to all my friends. I loved it. Close enough. You can see the guy, he's lying down, he's got his head on a pillow, he's on his side, he's staring at his computer, which is on its side, and his mouse is up on the wall as he's moving it. And it says close enough. So I think the problem today would be that even though you and I try to practice these principles of good body use, we're not sure if our students go home and do it. Maybe that's why I work with my students, or somebody works with them practically every day for a while when they're in retraining. I'm not saying she's a great pianist, Maggie, here, but she does seem quite happy because she's optimizing her central nervous system. She's well aligned. Joey is not so well aligned. He's maybe more talented. He may even have a better career. But those are body use patterns that could most likely get him into trouble. And as I often say to students who come to me and say, well, Dr. Lister-Sink, you know, I've found such and such and such images and beautiful pianists who just won the Cliburn or Moscow, whatever, on the internet, and they're not adhering to these principles at all. But they're winning, and they're very successful, and they're beautifully musical, which I would agree with, all of that. But I would also say to them, well, the way you can answer if a student of yours questions what you're doing is you can say, well, you know, cigarettes, for instance, and I should know, coming from Winston-Salem, growing up with the smell of tobacco, cigarettes don't kill everybody. My dad smoked, but he lived to be 97 with no lung problems, but my mother died at 67 of emphysema because she was a chronic smoker. I grew up with smoking myself. I never smoked, but we grew up with it. And so the probabilities of developing a lung condition or heart disease from smoking is very high. And that's why I say, well, you are trying to give your students the very best chance at good health when they play the piano and elsewhere. So if the probabilities are high, if you sit at the piano like that hour after hour, because repetition is our big problem, as it is at the computer, if you sit there like that hour after hour, you are definitely compromising a lot of things. I show this because I had an aha experience about Schroeder. I always gave him as an example of poor posture. And I think that's really unfair because his problem was not poor posture, it was ergonomics. The piano was too small. And it just struck me one day. Back at the turn of the century, that's a beautiful Renoir painting. A lot of people, every home had a spinet upright of some sort. In fact, a lot of Debussy and a lot of Ravel, a lot of the music we absolutely adore was written actually on these spinet uprights with the candles there. They had glorious posture, but they had good posture back then anyway. My dad and his siblings, they were born in the early 20th century. They were carpenters and farmers, and they had beautiful posture because posture was associated with good health. They did not have antibiotics or things like that, or vaccines that we do now. But they associated good breathing, good health with good posture, meaning optimal alignment. Not a stiffness upright, but an optimal balance of everything. And then Reginald Garrick, I urge you, if you're interested in the history of technique, to get Reg's book. He was a marvelous man, one of the kindest and most humble people I've ever met, but he also had an exhaustive mind, encyclopedic mind with an exhaustive knowledge. And he thought, after going through the entire history of piano, he truly thought that there was a core, as he says, if we look through the past, there are many different perspectives, but, and all of these people have worked diligently to find a way to play in order to make our playing more meaningful, but he also felt that there were core principles. He and I talked about this a lot, and he called it enlightened technique, but it was the coordination of the whole body with the piano. Joseph Hoffmann, they also are good examples of marvelous alignment. And here he says, healthful piano technique operates in harmony with the laws of nature, with a special regard for those laws concerned with physiological movement and muscular coordination. Okay? Here's the principle. Get the most out of your art with the least amount of physical effort. And I have a handout, some of the laws we break: overuse, skeletal misalignment, excessive force, et cetera, but we're going to be doing some hands-on virtual hands-on work so that I can demonstrate some of those principles to you. I truly believe that not only does this keep you healthier, this understanding of good body use, and help you vastly reduce your risk of injury, or if you get injured, you'll understand more why if you did something that broke those core principles or those laws of good movement. But I think it also, well, it enhances speed. It's easy to play. As Agosti used to say, true virtuosity is ease. And he didn't mean relaxed. He meant that the movements feel smooth and wonderful. Even when I'm playing this, if you learn how not to accumulate muscle tension, how to optimally align all the bones, you're putting forces into the key in the most concentrated and efficient way, And so you really don't, I don't want to say you don't break a sweat, but you actually don't break a sweat. And if you watch Rubinstein play, the great late Rubinstein or Van Cliburn, or pianists of that sort, you'll see the same kind of beautiful body use, and at the same time, glorious music making, which is, as I said, what we're all about here. And then also my students have reported it really does not only prevent discomfort, strain, and pain, but it also produces a sense of well-being and helps. Actually, the study I made of my own method when I was getting my doctorate a couple years ago at Columbia showed that it reduces performance anxiety and promotes greater focus and attention because you're optimizing your brain-body connection, your central nervous system, and your brain activity. And the biggest, to me, is so important, is that when you get out of the way, your body gets out of the way, and there are fewer obstacles between you and the music and the sound you're producing, you can listen much more. And listening is such an essential part of tone quality, monitoring that, hearing the phrase shape, all of that. We have to continually listen, which I think oftentimes pianists don't, because once the hammer strikes the string, that's, well, our job's over, so we don't have to listen like the violinist would or the singer. But we actually do. And I think this helps a person, as my teacher Edith Latiner said, put their ears out on stalks, sort of like Dumbo. You're sitting there and you're just hearing and taking in stereophonically your sound. Hallmarks: efficient muscle use, the whole body, and non-accumulation of muscle tension. If I'm weightlifting, even when I'm deadlifting, I may be accumulating tension as I'm coming up and down, but that thing goes on the ground and I rest. But there are certain sports and things where you do sustain contraction a lot, but piano doesn't have to be one of them at all. Chopin, have the body supple right to the tips of the toes. He loved the idea of suppleness. I want to just mention to you hypermobility. I don't know if you all have it or your students have it. I'll show you some images. Here's the Byton score that you could look at online to test whether your students or you have it. If you have a certain amount of points, you do have it. And a lot of musicians have it. There's studies have shown that musicians and women, some studies have shown that they tend to have it more than others. But I don't have it here. But when we see our students struggling, and we try to develop their little palm muscles and get their little arches going and all of that, and they can't, it's not something that they can help. And I was just briefly going to show you what you can do. At first I thought that we would, you'd have to go out to Target, and with a mask, of course, and buy these little Zoom Zooms. They're cute, and little kids love them. I love them. I mean, it's very sweet. And you get a scrunchie, and you just, I don't know if you can see it. I don't know how close we are, Zach, but I'm going to put this little puppy on, put it right here. You can get all sizes, but we get the smallest. And you put the scrunchie around like this. I can't this is so simple, but my students came up with this. It's brilliant. And so you just attach it lightly to the student's hand, and voila. Now, his little nose may hit the key, but you will be amazed. Suddenly, the little kid with all the push-down knuckles will suddenly have this gorgeous arch, hand arch. And my students actually practice with it when they're retraining. You can play with it. I don't know. I actually never tried it with this, but it worked. And so I have an arch. I teach it. I developed it in my 20s, but this is something that works. But if you don't want to pay $6.95 for this, buy a packet of scrunchies and get a common garden variety sock from your sock drawer and roll it up. My students all come up with these brilliant ideas. They're unbelievable. They're the ones that really got me onto hypermobility. You put the sock in the same place, so it doesn't cost anybody anything except the scrunchies, and they come in a pack of 6 or so. And there it is again. So you've got, and you can get a smaller sock. You know, socks come in all sizes. That's about as cheap fix as you can get. And what that does is when they're working, it reminds them of what that beautiful arch is. I always use mirrors so they can look at themselves in the mirror. It reminds them of what that arch is, and it also helps them if they're playing little exercises, just putting pressure through from their forearm, they can actually begin to build these little muscles that will help stabilize all of that, at least somewhat. Some people are so mobile, hypermobile here, that they can't do that, and they're hypermobile in this little joint. I'll show you some images. One thing you want to discourage from your students is party tricks. Chopin could put his legs over his shoulders. It might have been really entertaining, but it's really not good for anybody. Dancers have it, and then you see a lot of young pianists on YouTube doing big works, but I'm going ouch the whole time because they're stretching that far because they actually are highly hypermobile. But what it means is they're putting a lot of force through these little joints that are in extension. They are overextended, and they're really wearing those joints out. So all that stretching stuff can, with a lot of force into it, is really, really hard on the joints. That's a biomechanical principle of that optimal alignment and how you direct force into the key. So they may sound great. You can make a lot of sound. I can make a huge amount of sound with my little teeny finger and arm, but over the years it wears this joint out, and the thumb too, if we have small hands. And most of our children have small hands. Most of my students, a lot of them are women, and they have much smaller hands. So there's an example of, if that looks familiar, it looks a bit tarantula-like, but it's a wonderful lady that I met actually after an Alexander technique. Shout out to Suzanne, by the way, if she's here. It was at our workshop, Suzanne, and I was telling her I was going to give a hypermobility presentation in Glasgow, and she said, oh, I have it, and so she let me snap these shots of it. Is that familiar? And you often see that. That's very familiar to me, but I have a bit of a solution. Hang on. Clarinets, you see this a lot, and you see it a lot in string players. That's the hypermobility there in what we call the DIP joint, this final distal interphalangeal joint, and then the PIP. So we've got several joints there that can be quite hypermobile. I won't play that. Okay, I want to show you what these are. And there's several brands on Amazon. These are called Easy Finger Splints, and they have been lifesavers. In fact, I've had some of my students with hypermobility put these on and play and feel like they actually are in control and can direct their forces into the key in the first time in their lives. So they're just, you can't, if I've been urging these companies to make them in different colors for obvious reasons, because people of color need not to have them show up, because they don't really show up on my skin. And so actually, they come in about 15 sizes, and they can even go on the thumb. And what they do is they stabilize these joints. So if someone has that problem, once again, suddenly, when you've seen something like that, you see something like that. And so they're little plastic braces. One of my students is so enthralled with them, she ordered through her physical therapist specially sized silver ones. They're lighter and they're very pretty. Of course, they look a little odd on stage, but she uses them primarily for practice. So these are easy finger braces. If you have any questions, you can email me or text me or something, and I think I've got that information on the handout. But these are things I think that in the trenches, so to speak, in our studios, we see every day problems like that. So I'll scoot through here. If you do, by the way, if they do have hypermobility, well, we do this with small hands also. We refinger passages. We build a lot more rest into our work together, because that sort of allows the joints to de-stress and the muscles that have to stretch the fingers out. And we have to choose repertory that doesn't require these vast extensions, which a lot of people will fight, because one time one of my friends, a musician, composer, asked me, why do you play all that late 19th century stuff when you know your hand's too small for it? You just want to show off? And I said, what? I play that music because I love it, because it speaks to me. I'm not trying to show off with it. Well, you just need to play, Schubert and Mozart. No, I think we need a choice. We have a choice. And as Carol Leone wrote, Goldilocks had a choice. And so that's why we are lobbying piano industries to make at least one choice of a smaller keyboard. Modify the instrument. And by the way, there should be on the handout these websites. I urge you all to join what's called Pianists for Alternatively Sized Keyboards. It's a wonderful group of people in Australia and England and America and Canada, all over the place, that are lobbying to have piano manufacturers build at least one size a little bit smaller. It makes a huge difference. Once again, a lot of my smaller-handed pianists have just wept when they've started playing it, because suddenly things that have been impossible for them to play before, they're able to play with great ease. And there are charts that I won't trouble you with today, but these are charts that show just where we are. There's the chart, the gauge, and I urge you to get this, download it from online, the PASC website, and it's a goldmine of information about all this. And just see where your students, they'll love measuring themselves, put their hand down in a stretched out position. And if they're hypermobile, that means it probably won't be a good thing, but the stretched out position will show you just how wide you are and where you come in at what size keyboard. And this is how the smaller keyboard at the top there, it shows you just how a smaller keyboard is so much healthier for that hand than the hyperextension in the bottom one. Okay, so once again, we get down to the hallmarks of good coordination, which we're now going to launch into a bit. Efficient muscle use of the whole body and optimal use of the entire musculoskeletal system in service to the music. Okay, so there are a whole lot of muscles in the body, 4 or 5 layers. That's the outermost. I'll just scoot you through this. Second and third layer, and I'm sure many of us have been to massage therapists thinking that we don't have any problems, but feeling kind of tight, and they start digging a bit, and then digging literally, like excavating, because they're digging into those different layers of muscles. And so they're hitting some of them that have been tight for years, maybe even 40% tight, and we just didn't even know it. There's the 4th layer, and finally the 5th and 6th layers. Albinos is the artist of this, I think 18th century. Okay, the trapezius muscle, this big one, the muscle of choice, you might say, for pianists, for computer users, for anybody who looks at a keyboard and does this. This is the one that really gets it. And I want you to look at this. If you were here, I would hand you just a simple 10-pound or 8-pound medicine ball. You know what they are. And we'd pass it around. And you would, oh, it's heavy. Right. Well, that's your head. Actually, that's probably lighter than our heads. The average head's about 10 to 12 pounds, the adult head. So you see, when the spine is optimally aligned, when we're sitting well, plenty of space between the vertebrae, and the 4 natural curves, the body is perceiving that, the biomechanics of it, the load bearing is 12 pounds. As we move the head forward, the load bearing becomes more like 32 pounds that all these muscles and the spine have to support. And then this, which is what a lot of us get into at the piano, looking at the music over many, many, many hours. And piano teachers, too, as we stand at these very awkward positions, at least pre-COVID, before we started doing Zoom, 42 pounds, obviously stressing the body. And finally, I want to just mention something that I think we all probably have. The somatics people, somatics is self-education, self-knowledge, self-awareness. The somatics people call it sensory motor amnesia. There's a kind of a loop that goes from the brain to the muscles and back. It's a motor loop. It's a nerve loop. So it takes in signals from the sensory nerves, like I see that piece of music, and then I give the signal from the seeing of it, then through the brain to the picking up of it. What happens is when we're sitting here playing a lot, over time we're so taken up with so many other things that are happening, music making, hearing, listening, memorizing, trying to get from one place to the other, that we slowly begin to tighten. As you're sitting there, actually just envision yourself for a moment looking at the music. Can't quite see it. That's another problem. Make sure the student's glasses or yours are appropriate to the distance. Can't quite see it. The head goes forward. Follow me. The shoulders go up a little bit as we begin to play and worry a little bit about, do we actually know this? Will I have this ready? Then we begin to tighten the rest of the arms. Out a little bit, up a little bit. You can do this with me. And then some of us may, or our students may, push these wrists down, especially if they're like typing like this, and start moving the fingers like this. And then we move it back and forth. And we've got a mess, basically. We've got, now what I want you to do is relax those shoulders. Let these upper arms come in and just let the humeri hang happily. And then just release the fingers and the hands and move easily. Easier said than done. And that's why when I'm retraining injured pianists or any pianists, adults, we start at the very beginning, which we will shortly, just for a moment. But sensory motor amnesia is when we have literally forgotten that we were tight, that we were actually tightening. So I may walk around like this. Close your eyes a minute. I'm going to close mine. Freeze where you are. Don't move an inch. Don't move a bit. Just freeze. Whatever you're doing, and I know you put your coffee down, and just kind of don't do anything. Just don't move your body. I want you to check in with your eyes closed, because when your eyes are open, the eyes are the bullies of the senses. You'll be noticing everything else. I want you now to go into the realm of noticing your body. That's what the second half this is going to be about. We're going to reacquaint ourselves with the body. Now, as you're sitting there frozen in whatever alignment or posture you've caught yourself in, as if someone took a photo of you and you're looking at it, you're going, oh, wow. I think I don't want to be doing that to my body. So I want you, with your eyes closed now, to begin to ask your body, where would you like to be, body? How would you like to be if I'm going to sit here and watch Barbara play? And I apologize for that. You probably all went into the startle reflex pattern, they call it. Now get out of that. So where would you want your body to be if you're sitting here listening to Barbara and watching her PowerPoint, trying to make some sense of this, with everything else going on around you and all the worries in the world? Take a moment of respite, of rest, and just ask yourself, where do you want to be, body? Let's reconnect and get acquainted again. Probably the first thing you'll do is notice you took a nice deep breath. So, and my apologies, I'll put that on airplane mode shortly. So now open your eyes, and if I saw you, what I usually see is a number of people pretty much sitting like this. Those of you who perhaps sing in a choir or a church choir or whatever, normally we attempt as conductors to have our choristers sit in a certain way that's going to optimize their breathing, optimize their projection, optimize their ability to sing well. So if we just take those moments, just checking in like that, we can kind of begin to awaken our body's awareness of itself. and I'll turn this off now. My daughter, so I'm hoping nothing's wrong there, so when we take a break shortly, I'll check with her, because she's dealing with power outages and all sorts of things. So what we need today for the next hour, now that we're going to take a little break after that, is I'm going to have you check in with the body. You're going to have probably about 50 minutes of just having a good time reacquainting yourself with various capabilities of the body, with the breathing, with the alignment, with basically having a sense of well-being. You're not going to be relaxed. If you were totally relaxed, you'd be on the floor, in bed, sleeping or whatever, not even necessarily sleeping, because we don't relax sometimes. When we sleep, we have TMJ, a lot of us. But at this point, you're going to just really be good to your body for the next little while. After you go get your water or some more coffee or your decaf or whatever. And I urge you to stand up, walk around, even walk outside. I know down here in Raleigh and in Winston too, it's a beautiful day. So I'd love for you to stand up, walk around, have a fabulous time. You're going to be doing a few little exercises afterwards, but for now, acquaint yourself with your body. You're going to be given permission to be good to yourself for the next hour in this workshop. So please have a good time right now. Refresh yourself a bit, refresh your brain, hydrate your brain and your body, and I'll see you in about 5 minutes, all right? Thank you. Welcome back. I like to share my own personal life a bit sometimes because it's often pertinent, and we talk about stressors from inside and outside, and I just had a rather major one. You heard the phone ring, and I apologize, but I'm glad I had it on. I think that was really a stroke of luck. My daughter was calling. We recently got a really beautiful little Cavachon dog, 20 pounds, Zizzy. She's just marvelous. She's the love of our lives. I've never had a dog so wonderful. But my daughter called me. She had just been to Food Line and ran in for some ice since we have no power, and the dog had ingested a bunch of dark chocolate from her purse. So any of you who are dog lovers, I know I can hear you moaning now. So thank God that Chloe, my daughter, called me. And when I called her, she asked me, is that bad? I said, yes, it's extremely bad. It's highly poisonous. So get her to the emergency vet. So at this moment, my daughter is coursing along to the emergency vet, and we're just hoping it will be in time. So I will compartmentalize that, and Carol has my phone in case there's a call or something, but I will now turn my attention back to you. So what I want to do right now is mention what is really the key to all of this in terms of developing really healthful technique. The key is, as my Dutch American, she was American, but she lived in Holland when I was there, my teacher, Edith Latiner, said, you have to be aware. Je moet bewust zijn in Dutch. You have to be aware. Because I had been injured, my own story was injury at 16 from playing Beethoven Third Concerto, first movement with orchestra. And 2 weeks before the performance, I woke up with searing burning in my right arm. My mother, who always looked after me so beautifully, found some doctor near our farm and near Winston-Salem who gave me a cortisone shot every day, which is, I think that's pretty extraordinary. Took care of the pain. Don't know what it did to my brain or body, but also I was told to rest for 2 weeks. Well, the concert was in 2 weeks. So I guess it was then that I learned about the efficacy of mental practice, and that's all I did. I was able to work some with the left hand, but what injured me were those fast, rapid passages that we play constantly, the passage work, all of that stuff again and again. So I had never been taught how not to accumulate all that tension. But the interesting thing, and I wrote this in the article I just sent in last night about injury, is that nobody really knew back then in the 60s what this was. I didn't get a name for it. There have been many injuries like that over the decades, and now we're just beginning to, the last couple decades, begin to identify them, know what they are. But even then, injured pianists have a plethora of complex problems. It can start with what mine did, which was tendonitis, a burning. But then if it's not diagnosed, treated, or if they don't stop and get over it, so to speak, it can begin to kind of migrate up here. It can start here in the neck. The problems here, if you have, for instance, pain right here in your wrists, that can be from a compressed vertebra in your cervical spine. So these are very complex syndromes that we all want to try to avoid with our students. I know sometimes we laughingly say, I wish they'd practice enough to injure themselves playing, but just a joke. But the point is, a lot of our students really do want to go ahead with their lives in music. And some of you may also be sitting there having had problems yourself with playing. So this is for you, and hopefully for your students. But it starts with awareness. Just the simple awareness of ourselves in this space right now, in this time. If I were a cat, I could easily do this. I wouldn't be talking with you, but if I were a cat, I wouldn't think about my dog. I wouldn't worry about the chocolate. So we have so many things on our minds: COVID, pandemic, election, all these extraordinary things in this extraordinary week. So what we're going to try to do now is actually take a bit of a journey through the senses and sort of move away from the election and from COVID and from Zizzy, my dog, although she's there in my prayers, of course. But we're going to move away from that. And I'm simply going to ask you just to look at this beautiful Hoberman sphere. I love this thing. Children love it too, because it's colorful and it moves. And it demonstrates how everything's interconnected, a kind of a tensegrity, they call it. So as I move it, I want you first of all just to sit or stand. It might be nice for you to stand for a moment. Stand comfortably with your weight balanced between your feet, which I can't do because of my broken foot, but I'm trying. And as I expand it, I want you simply to follow the expansion and take a deep breath. Just an easy breath. And remember, anything I ask you to do now in the next few moments, I want you to feel that it's good for your body. If it does not feel right, including standing up right now, do not do it. Be gentle with yourself and just ask your body what feels best, okay? So here we go. So I'm just going to expand it. So you're going to first blow out the air, exhale. Now through the nose, inhale if you can. And exhale through the mouth or the nose. And just check in. How are your shoulders? How's your neck? This is something you can do with your students. Now inhale. A little bit deeper. And then exhale. Meanwhile, you'll have to just release your lower abdominal wall so that the diaphragm can drop down and expand. And you can create a vacuum and take in air into the lungs. Inhale, a little bit more, and exhale. Good. Inhale, here we go, one last time. I don't want you to hyperventilate. Woo, a big lung full of air, and welcome to the here and now. Hoberman sphere. Now, what I'd like for you to do is, and I assume we still have our PowerPoints at. We watched, these are cues, I call them. And there's a cue sheet in your handouts that my students put up on the rack. Cue sheet 1, I call it. It's preparing to play. It's getting the brain and the body sort of joined and in their optimal condition to play. So we just watch the natural flow of your breath. Now I want you to find your sitting bones. Let me see if I haven't. Yes, there they are. Okay, so this one you'll actually have to sit on your piano bench or whatever. And by the way, I love this piano bench, not because it's adjustable well, which it is, I love that too, but because it has a cushiony surface so that I can actually perch on my sitting bones without them hurting. Because wooden benches do not work. Most people's sitting bones, if you see those sitting bones, they are curved. Some people's are a little more pointed. They're at the bottom. I don't have a pointer with me, but they're those things at the very bottom, little rockers at the bottom of the sacrum. And you want to perch on them because that, in terms of biomechanics, that's the best place to be for the torso. So because you're then using the muscles in the front and the back of your body equally. So nothing's strained. So what I want you to do, the best way to find them is take your left hand and put it under your seat and then gently, because you'll feel it, because you're now supporting, your hand is feeling the weight of your torso as you lean over. And the torso, is a good part of our whole body weight. And you'll find it, and so then you remove the hand, and then your students can do this too if they're not embarrassed, Then you find the other one, tilt over, and there it is. And I can't actually rest my entire weight of the torso on my hand. It would crush it, it feels like. So, but I can remove it, and then it's really nice to tilt side to side. Just tilt, and then you'll feel the weight of the torso streaming into your left, or in your case, right, if you're mirroring me, your right sitting bone, and then into your left sitting bone, okay? And then back and forth. Because when I'm playing the piano, certainly, I will be doing a whole lot of tilting. So, there are the sitting bones. That's where we start from, the breath and then the sitting bones. Now, thanks to the Alexander technique, folks, and others, you allow your spine to decompress and lengthen. We don't pull it up, stretch it up. That's not good for it. Nor do we compress it. I often like it to those fundraisers, sponges, if down here at Chapel Hill, 91.5 or whatever you listen to, Raleigh, WRAL, whatever it is, radio station, they often will have fundraisers and they'll send out a desiccated sponge. It's flat as a pancake. Oh, no, it's flatter than a pancake. And you put it under the water and it expands. So what I want you to do, now that you've found those sitting bones, so tilt, I want you to close your eyes and allow that spine just to feel like it's expanding, lengthening both up and down. So you're not pulling your shoulders up or trying to stretch your spine up. You're just allowing it to come out of a compression. And those of you who take Alexander technique very seriously, which I do, this is a little different. I'm paying homage to the Alexander technique folks because it's very central to the training that I offer. However, the cue sheet doesn't start with the neck. It's starting with the sitting bones on the bench. So now that your spine is out of compression as much as you can, don't force. Observe your breathing, and please do this with your eyes closed. And now allow your shoulders just to be released. Check in with them. If they are tight or up, if you just pause a moment, just pause and ask them, how are you doing? And they'll probably say, well, I'm a little tight, I'd like to, could you just release me? And you can. And then move up away from gravity to your neck. And remember that head that we saw, that 42-pound misaligned head on that top of that poor spine. What I want you to do is take that medicine ball or bowling ball of your head and free your neck of any unnecessary tension, and you open your eyes a moment and just gently move side to side like that, just gently, slowly. If you do things slowly, you'll be able to notice them more. Very important principle in Feldenkrais technique also. And then you can look up and look down, but gently. Don't push anything. Just whatever your range of motion is now, just do that. All of us are computer users. We're staring at Zoom. We really need to check in with our necks. Not just the front of the neck or the front of the torso, but the back. Put some eyes in the back of your back. Okay? Now, so then, close your eyes again. With a slightly freer neck, balance your head, and I often say like a helium balloon on top of your spine, so that it's so light. Because you see, if you are well balanced on that wonderful spine of ours, the head's going to feel light. And the trapezius muscle that we saw the image of is not going to be strained and overworked. Okay, so open your eyes again. So just simply nod like this, like, oh, I understand, Barbara. Thank you. That little nod actually is coming from this atlanto-occipital joint, that top joint of the spine, and that needs to be free. Before COVID, I used something called professional tactile guidance, and I train my students very carefully in this. We only use delicate touch if necessary with students who don't want to be touched at all, even with a few fingertips here or here or here. We use a feather or some other little thing to jumpstart their awareness, to make them sense something. But if you simply put your fingers lightly on your neck and relax your arms too, and feel these muscles that often get so tight, these scalenes and others there, and the deeper ones too. Just feel them. A lot of us have this TMJ, of course. It's pure stress, folks. It's stress which disconnects us from our bodies. So let's reconnect. So just close your eyes. I'm not watching you, I won't look. Close your eyes and just drop your jaw. And don't you dare look at me, because I'm going to do it too. Eyes closed. I'll just let that jaw hang. Just for a moment. Free the neck. Balance the head like a helium balloon on top of the spine. Now open your eyes and let's scoot down in our kinesthetic awareness to the arms. I mentioned happy hanging humerus. It's a little term I came up with. It's silly, but my students remember it very well. The humerus is the long bone. Let's see if we have it here. There are the 4 beautiful natural curves of the spine. It's not straight, is it? When you're just born, a little tiny baby, parts of it are straighter. But as you begin to walk and bear load, so to speak, then it begins to go into its 4 natural curves. And then we allowed our shoulders to be released. I'll keep coming back to these. And we allowed our neck to be released of unnecessary tension. Notice I'm not saying release everything, relax. I don't say get rid of tension. I can't do that, because if you are on planet Earth with gravity and you're standing up, you are using contraction. There's tension and contraction. But what we're trying to do today is just establish some core principles of how much do we actually need. And that's what I want you to keep asking yourself. Do I really need this to drink my coffee? I don't think so. So whatever you're doing right now, if you're sneaking around there and drinking your coffee or going to the sink or refreshing, whatever, pause and ask yourself, could I have done that with greater ease for my body? And then we balanced our head like a helium balloon. There's a helium balloon if I ever saw it. There's Courteau again at age 11. Unfortunately, fortunately, he didn't have a computer or an iPhone. He wasn't texting all the time, so he probably wouldn't look like that if Courteau were 11 years old now. Because we have a lot more problems, folks, now with our students than even in my generation. Because we at least, if we studied typing, in typing class, you learned good posture. And you even learned how to release your arms, how to align your wrist. That was 50s and 60s, I guess. But those principles, I don't think, are taught anymore. And then our upper arms now are hanging pendulously. This is what I wanted to get at. And his upper arms, let's just hang our upper arms. You're sitting now, back from the microwave or whatever. Sit again, find your sitting bones. Spine is allowed to lengthen, shoulders are released, neck is free. Unnecessary tension, head's a helium balloon. Now I want you to just allow your arms to just hang. They're not heavy. If you actually just weighed them, which you can, I mean, we know what each part of the body, it can be weighed, then it would have weight. I don't talk about weight here because this is a total structure. The arms are supported by the arm muscles, which are ending at your sternum, your sternoclavicular joint, believe it or not. So your arm muscles don't end here. The arm muscles that are controlling, do this a minute, just lift your arm slowly and put your hand right here in the pectoral area, right underneath the collarbone. You can do, I guess, your left side, and feel that muscle. And then same in the back, you would feel, oh, wow, okay, is that yes. The superficial muscles of the back are the arm muscles. The superficial arms, or the muscles that are going to be lifting your forearm, are in this area. So if you see something moving, like this, go one joint back toward the heart, and you'll find what's actually moving it. For instance, if you do this with your leg, then your thigh muscles are doing this, nothing down here. You can keep those muscles utterly released, relaxed, if you will, as your quadriceps, your hamstrings, extend and flex the leg. So, back to the humerus. Back in the olden times, if you see images of Rachmaninoff or Paderewski on YouTube or whatever, and those of you who are of a certain age like me, grew up with seeing people sit at the piano more like this than like this. More and more, I sort of track what everyone's doing with their bodies as we go through the different decades. And more I'm seeing a lot more of this sort of work. I'm not talking about the kind of movement in the arms that you would do for this. I'm not talking about that kind of a movement, because you do, obviously, you're going to need, as the piano music expanded, you're going to need a lot more arm use. But that's different, because that would look like this from behind. That's different from hiking out the arms, and I want you to do this right now. Hike out your upper arms and hold it there. Now take your left arm, or right arm, as you mirror me, and put it right here on this area, this sort of shoulder pad, you might say, of the arm that sort of goes over the top of the arm. It's the rotator cuff muscles, but right here, primarily, I want you to feel the medial deltoid. So just simply hike out your arm, put your hand here, let the arm relax back down into gravity, the upper arm, and feel this muscle now contract. If you go over to your students often, this is one of the culprits I find in the whole beginning of risk factors for injury, is this, it's not just here, but it's right here where students, the shoulder comes up, this muscle, the medial deltoid, tightens and stays tight. Now just move your arm, your forearm back and forth and kind of play a little bit with a slightly tightened medial deltoid. That immobilizes this, or it diminishes the mobility that we need at the piano all the way through the arm. And it also just accumulates tension in the medial deltoid. Forget it. Just let it hang, so that when you're playing, and this is something you can do at home on your own, even without retraining and all the hullabaloo I teach and all of that. But you can just pause when you're playing whatever it is. If you're doing something, if you tend to do this, do that, then or your students are playing, and you see this thing creeping up, tell them to stop there, and then tune in, close their eyes, tune in, and go, whoa, didn't know I had that much tension right here, accumulated. It helps, it works every time, because you can, then they can play a passage, even your more advanced students. If you want to give them awareness of what they're doing, have them do the fragment, and have them stop, freeze, close their eyes, and then say, okay, let's release, Maria, let's release those upper arms. Let's see, oh wow. Gee, and I hope Maria will say, gee, I didn't know I was that tight. Because you don't have to be. You can start with this freedom, and then stop, and then let that just hang. Let that hang. The happy hanging humerus. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but this seems to be a real corridor between the lower arm problems and then the shoulder and neck problems. It's made grown men, pianists, women weep once they've released this. They see how much power they have too. It's like if a pitcher tried to throw a certain distance or 90 miles an hour, you've got that sequential motion is really important. But if you have a locked up rotator cuff, you just don't have the power, you force. So that's what happens. We all have to play forte, fortissimo in Rachmaninoff or whatever. And unfortunately, everybody has to. And we don't, it's like giving lady golfers a set of clubs that larger men use, or larger people, and tell them they have to hit 300 yards down the fairway, which they're not supposed to be able to do. So we are asking our smaller students, our children, our younger students and smaller-handed pianists to actually make these loud sounds, put that much force into the keyboard. When I'm playing Rachmaninoff, I'm expecting. I'm expected to get as much sound as some very large man. And that means that the smaller the hands, the smaller the student. We have to even more help them optimize what they've got, or not make quite such a demand. If they can't hit the ball 200 yards down the fairway, then that's okay for a while. And then we'll learn the tricks of the trade of getting big sound. I learned them many, many years ago of really using that bass, really using that pedal, and then I lightly add in the rest of it. I don't force each of those keys down. But anyhow, this area, the medial deltoid, do that again, just put your hand on it and just kind of hike it out. And then slowly release it and let it hang. So when you're practicing or you're teaching your students, have them start with this once they've done this cue sheet we're doing, and have them put their hand on their own medial deltoid. They can do that on Zoom, and if it feels squishy, it's probably released. And then have them lean over and just observe that it's a pendulum. It's the most mobile joint of the body, the shoulder joint. And so we're not going to do this to it, but we do want to do that and then come back and release. Okay? So do this a minute with these humori, and do one arm at a time, because the brain can't think of two things at once. It has to shuttle very quickly between one thing and another. And that's why multitasking can be so negative, so bad for the body, because we're just thinking too many things at once. So we have to focus really on one body part right now at a time. So what I want you to do is just hike this out. Put your hand here, feel that. Whoa, that's a big muscle, the hunky muscle. And then just drop it and let it hang. And feel what that feels like. That's what you want to go back to, the happy hanging humerus. Now, I want you to learn how to separate the forearm from the upper arm. Very important. Not that I'm just going to play with my forearms, although when I did the Bach, I know I'm pedaling with my left foot. That's reflective now that I have this broken foot. I'm not even moving my upper arms. They're not crushed into my body. That's not what we want. They're just hanging. There's a little play in them. But it was a narrower keyboard then. And with Chopin, then I'd be doing this. I wouldn't be doing this. That's excessive motion. I don't need it. So just for a moment then, put your hands now, rest your hands and arms, forearms, as much as you can. Just rest them on your thighs. Now I'm going to keep repeating this cue sheet one. What I want you to do is observe your breathing. Close your eyes first. Observe the breathing. Allow the spine to lengthen, up and down. Release your shoulders of any unnecessary tension, including then your neck. Release any unnecessary tension as you balance it beautifully on top of your spine like a helium balloon. Observe your breathing. If you just observe the breathing, that tends to do wonderful things to the body. And you breathe deeper, you oxygenate your brain more and your body, you're able to think clearer. And now I want you to open your eyes and just do this. We're going to do both arms now. Shuttle between them and now release them. And check on your right upper arm to release. Now follow me and do this. Shoulders up. In other words, if we want them not to have their shoulders up, let's have them get it out of their systems. Let's have our shoulders up. So you feel how that feels, those extremes, that opposite extreme. So we're here, out. Lift the hands, that's called extension of the fingers. That's extensor muscles are used for that. Curl the fingers in. You're not going to like this. all you teachers, I can hear you moaning, and start wiggling the fingers in that, what they call co-contraction. Okay, now move side to side. Oops. Now, stop. Release the fingers from the knuckles. Actually, release the hands from the wrist joints. Relax your shoulders. Breathe the neck. Relax the upper arms. And then just move side to side with your fingers just hanging. Okay. And now just rest your hands and arms on your thighs again. Okay? And then shake it out. I'm going to check with Carol. Carol, did you hear anything from my daughter?
She apparently tried to call, but I left a message for her.
To call back,
She
sure.
was 20 minutes away from finishing.
Okay.
I left a message.
Okay, you can call her too, just to check and see how things. Sorry, folks. You know, loved ones come first in our lives. They should. I tell my students that too. They have to miss a lesson or whatever. If there's some problem in the family with sickness or whatever, that always comes first. So now that we've sort of explored that, I want you just to take your left arm, if you're mirroring me, and just do this, because you've got wonderful mobility right here in your arm. And then now I want you, as I started to mention a minute ago, to separate your forearm from your upper arm. Can you lift your forearm, put your finger right here in your elbow, the crook of your elbow, keep your humerus hanging, balance there on your left sitting bone, mirroring me, and then just pick up your forearm. Let your hand hang for now. I wouldn't do this for too long because we have tendons here that connect the extensor muscles here at the top of the arm with the bones of the hand, the fingers. And if we do this too long and hang the hand like this, it overstretches these tendons across the wrist. So we don't want to do that too long. But I do want you to feel what it's like to just lift your forearm like that, have your wrist joint free, and have your fingers just hanging into gravity. So the only thing in your arm that's opposing gravity right now, folks, is your forearm. And that's how I would place my hands on the keyboard. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do this. I would simply be sitting like I told you, we talked about, balanced, and I put my hand like that. And you notice my wrist joint becomes very free. There it is. Okay? So practice just for a minute. If you have a tabletop there, this is about fundamental efficiency from the get-go. I figure if we can't know it and control it in the simplest of our gestures and movements, then it would be hard to, as we get much more complicated. Okay, so you're just balancing on your sitting bones. The spine is just nice and expanded, and the shoulders are released, and neck is free of unnecessary tension. And you can even touch your head a little bit. When I was with my students, as I was about to say a moment ago, I would put my hands gently right here, my fingertips. And if they were stuck, then it meant that these muscles were quite tight. And you'll find if you'd ever do that, post-COVID, that if they allowed you to, with their permission, you might find your students held this area. So they can learn to release that. So there you are, and you've got a tabletop, hopefully about the height of the piano. And if not, you can do this on your thighs. This is fine. So what I want you to do is just practice this with me. You're going to simply lift your forearm from your elbow, the brachialis biceps, brachioradialis. There's muscles in here, they act as pulley muscles, and they're pulling that forearm up. But injury often comes from overuse of the forearm muscles, especially the extensors, and holding that. Also, we tighten the triceps. So what I'm asking you to do is leave all of these muscles just released right in here, and your tricep muscle, which is back here, and just simply lift the drawbridge. Crank it up, and let the hand hang just momentarily, fingers there like buckets off the end of a drawbridge down at the beach. And just feel what it's like to have the humerus hanging, and now just lower it easily. And take a moment then to feel the muscles relax completely as you rest it on your thigh. Close your eyes and take a nice breath. Observing your breathing and pausing like that is sort of like hitting the refresh button on the computer. It just refreshes everything and you start anew. Refreshes muscles, refreshes your brain, your attention. So now let's do that again. Put your finger in your, like you had a pencil, you could do a pencil with your students, in the crook of the elbow. And now just slowly lift it. Observe your breathing, your spine. You have to work the whole canvas now. Now I want you to lift your hand like I'm doing. I am in hyperextension. I'm using my extensor muscles here to lift the hand. Please put your hand in encircle your extensor muscles, your top of your forearm, and just lift. Feel as you do this, these muscles working. They're extending your hand. So the muscles that are doing this movement of the hand are not your finger muscles. They're back here in the forearm. So just do that a minute. Now, I want you to put your hand underneath your forearm where the flexors are and pull in a couple times like this and feel the flexor muscles working. Now, what we don't want when we're moving is to have extension, like with a low wrist, and then also flex the fingers like that, because that is giving you what we call a co-contraction. And so there are other names for it, but co-contraction is when you're using opposing muscle groups together. That's okay if you're bearing that load for a moment, momentarily, because you've got to stabilize joints. When you're doing a push-up, you've got both sides of the both agonist and antagonist muscles, as they call them, stable, so it can hold those joints in place. But when you're moving side to side, you don't want that. You don't want this kind of thing, okay? There you go. So what I want you to do on the thigh then is just lift the forearm gently and then just play a simple 5-note scale like this, you see? Just that. And now just move your hands. See how I'm just resting those fingertips on my thigh. Just let them release. Don't hold them up. Just rotate slightly. Right. Okay? And likewise with your other arm, whichever that is, rotate that just slightly. And then do both of them. With that wonderful sense of the upper arm just hanging. Okay? All right. Like that. Okay? Now I'm going to talk just a moment about, I just got a good thumbs up from Carol, and I can tell you my brain just went, whee! Thank you. She's all right? Okay, and I guess they've gotten it in time, right?
Taking care of it right now.
Excellent. Don't let your dogs eat chocolate. My daughter didn't let her eat it. She snuck and got it, so that's just a sidebar. Okay. All right, back to you. Here's what I want you to do, because I want you to feel this wonderful sense of ease, which most of you probably already do, but we're trying to figure out little ways to teach it to our students. A lot is said about rotation. And those of you who've worked with the Talman folks and Edna Golonsky, who, by the way, is a very dear friend and a beloved colleague, I respect her immensely. I know her quite well. We've talked a lot about technique. I observed, in fact, she gave a marvelous workshop in Chapel Hill just last spring, late winter. So I got to see her again. We haven't seen each other in quite a while. So I have deep respect for what they've done. They've helped so many pianists get through injury. And we're on the same page in wanting so much to teach these good principles. But we come at it slightly differently, but there are a lot of roads to Rome. Rome is injury-preventive, efficient technique, and maximizing your artistry. There are a number of ways to Rome and to that goal. One of them they use in the beginning quite a bit, rotation. which is a really wonderful movement capability from your elbow. So I want you just to place your hand on your thigh and put your finger there in the crook of your elbow and raise your forearm. Observe your breathing. Now just allow your forearm to just rest on the thigh. So you're actually going to be perching, you might say, on your middle 3 fingers. But let your thumb hang, let your little finger hang, come up just a little bit, and just do this little up and down motion. Okay. I start with that motion, like this. That's the old Russian school also, and perhaps the new. A number of my friends have gone through that training. Alexander Peskanov, for instance, teaches that they lift and then they lower into gravity. So I actually start with the lifting capability from the elbow. There are muscles here that lift the drawbridge. There are also muscles in this area that rotate, and that's an incredibly important movement. So gently just rotate, put your finger here. We're not doing this rotation. In fact, put your arm straight out and do this rotation. That's from your shoulder, the rotator cuffs, okay? This is from your elbow, this rotation, so that your humeri are pretty happily hanging, okay? So you're just going to do that very gently. And let your fingers just rest. Don't hold them up. Just release them. That's another form of efficiency. You don't have to hold your fingers off the keys. Just rotate, okay? So go back to lift from your elbow, humerus hanging, then lower it. Now perch again on your middle 3 fingers and rotate. So those both come from the elbow area, the rotation and the lift. There's one more, sort of like the primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. I joke with my students, this is how they remember it. Let's say that yellow is the lift, and blue is the rotation, and red is a lateral movement, which we need, because the keyboard is, 4.5 feet wide or 5, whatever. Any keyboard, even your computer, you're going to need some lateral motion. Put your hand on your medial deltoid. You've learned that term today, perhaps for the first time, and bring your hand up into that nice arch, which we know. I don't really have to teach the arch to a group of players like you guys and teachers. Bring it up, perch on your middle fingers, let your thumb hang, bring it up. You can have the wrist can be level, which I like it when I'm landing. I don't like to play with a high wrist, but I actually don't play with a low wrist, because that tends to encourage isolated finger use, which we'll get to in a moment, shortly. And what I want you to do is just move the arm absolutely laterally. You could do it in your palm too. Just, in other words, don't lift your wrist, don't rotate, just move laterally, like that. That's lateral. Now, if you then put your hand right here, you'll feel that motion, that lateral motion. Let's say I have to go from here to here, that's here, okay? There's a point to all this. I isolate those 3 movements because I think it's important that we kind of sense where they come from and how to do them. So this is one, this is another rotation. So lift and lower the hinge joint, then lift the rotation, also from the elbow, the 2 joints there, and then the lateral. When you put them all together, you have something really beautiful called circumduction. You're inscribing a kind of a conical shape. And on the keyboard, some of us grew up hearing that called circles of the wrist. Wrist circles would actually dip down. I don't do that. But let's say I'm doing a little Alberti bass or this kind of figure. I'm lifting, lowering, and you can do this on your thigh, follow me. I'm lifting, lowering. Now as I come around, I'm actually rotating a little bit too. So I'm moving laterally. If you can see this, put your hand on your palm. Humerus hanging. And now just play C, E, G. And you'll notice, see what I'm doing here? Da, da, dee, da, 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 dee, da, 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 da. And don't pick up the fingers. This is another thing. This takes a while to differentiate one finger from another, as we say, in the brain, because they're very close. So you're not born with the ability to play the piano in such a complex way. It has to be taught. But that's why I teach it one stage at a time, and we work on mastering those. I go more slowly in the foundation than most teachers probably, and once they get the foundation, then I find the learning curve is pretty swift. But what I want you to do is just go thumb, third finger, E, ba, da, dee, da, da. And you'll notice this beautiful little semicircle. That's circumduction. It's using all three motions. And if I were breaking up the octave, da 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 dee da 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 dee da da da, you'd see more lateral motion. You wouldn't see this much. I don't need that much. You ask yourself, how much do I need to do this? To coordinate my entire arm. In other words, good coordination is the harmonious working together of all the parts. And Chopin, Liszt, and then Rachmaninoff, Scriabin, Debussy, they all, as we got further into the 19th century and then early 20th, they began to expand the repertory, and so we had to use the whole arm and even the torso lever at times. And certainly we use the leg and the foot lever. An organist, you certainly have to do that too. So now just put your hands on your thighs and simply do a nice little da-da-dee with me. Now, what I want you to do, and I want to leave you with this, because we went through cue sheet 1, but I want to leave you with the sense of when and how to release the humerus. So we're going to do, so you probably scooted your elbow out a little bit, just to adjust the fingers over those notes instead of reaching for them. That's an isolated finger thing. My arm leads everything. You'll see it in the wrist. Alicia Della Rocha even said one time, I play everything with my arms. And I think what she meant was everything is coordinated through the entire arm in this beautiful sequence, not in this stiff-legged kind of way of working. So if you do this, just do that a moment, and then I want you to release your humerus and let it hang happily. So let's just play on your thigh what could be, an octave. And now relax the whole arm and let the humerus hang. Once again, so you just lift from your elbow. You don't have to lift from here or stiffen any of the fingers. Just let them hang. Release. That will do more, I think, to really stave off accumulated tension and injury. The other thing is, how do we keep them from accumulating here? Well, that's many more stages, but my students release these muscles in the very beginning stages between each note. That's what I call my basic stroke, but I certainly would not try to demonstrate that here. It takes several weeks to learn that. And then eventually, they do 2 notes per stroke, and then 3. And each time they're releasing, or release. But I'm not going to show you that because it gets confusing. But what I do want today as we finish up is to work with these basic movements and senses. There's one cue sheet you have in there that's I want you to put up on the rack so that you're actually balanced well before you start: head, neck, spine, upper arms, legs. One thing I left out was let your legs hang, or let the thighs simply hang from the hip joints, and just close your eyes and feel your feet supported by the floor. It's really important to connect the lower body with the upper, okay? But here's what I'd leave you with. So you've got the cue sheet 1, but when you are at the keyboard with your own playing, what I can do today is simply tune you up for this wonderful sense of side-to-side motion with in the wrist released as you're moving, up and down, side to side, humerus released, okay, fingers hanging. So that's the main thing, and I think we've tuned up quite a bit now. So hopefully this helped. I hope you weren't confused, but you know where I am. I'm just a ways west, and it's been such a pleasure working with you and being here. It really has, and thank goodness the dog's all right. I'm deeply grateful.
Barbara,
So
we do have one
I'll now
question.
turn it over to Carol.
We do have one question for you specifically.
Sure, okay.
Sherry Ellis asks, where can I find info on the graduate music program at the school where Barbara teaches?
Oh, okay, well, that's very kind of you. I generally don't proselytize. Oh, hey, we've got some people coming in. I generally don't proselytize. Salem College website, you go you type in graduate music, and there's a master's program with an emphasis in injury-preventive technique. It's the only one of its kind that's approved by the NASM in the country, so we're very proud of it. It's a pedagogy and performance for organists and pianists, and then it's on the website, and then a certificate program also. Thank you. All right, now I'll turn it back over to Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure.
We'd like to thank Dr. Sink today for coming and helping us so much with this injury prevention. We're now delighted to have the next part of our program, which is going to be, I'm going to introduce Bonnie Walker, who is our president for Raleigh Piano Teachers Association, who will introduce our winners for the Teacher Merit Award. Bonnie?
Good morning and welcome to Ruggero Piano Company. I'm Bonnie Walker, president of Raleigh Piano Teachers. Just a vibrant group, even in the middle of this pandemic. We are virtually on just about a lot of things, and we're glad to have you with us this morning. It is my honor and privilege to recognize Richard Ruggero, who is going to, introduce our two winners of the Ruggero Teacher Merit Award. So come on up, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. I guess I'll just temporarily take the mask down just for a second. And yeah, these are very interesting times for all of us, and I admire the teachers so much for adapting and continuing to serve their students in a very, very different environment than what we're all used to. But I'm hearing so many success stories of people doing things virtually, sometimes carefully in person, but it's just really inspiring to see that the dedication that our teachers have. And this award is all about dedication over a period of time that these two fine teachers have shown to the Raleigh and Triangle community. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to recognize two very worthy recipients of the Ruggero Piano Teacher Merit Award. This is an award that shows involvement with students, with their teaching community, with organizations, professional organizations, and it's given each year by the Raleigh Piano Teacher Association to someone or two people that are nominated by their peers. So this is a very wonderful thing to be able to present this, especially this year. So without further ado, I would like to invite up Ann Scoggin and Christine Albro, this year's co-recipients of the Raleigh or the Ruggero Piano Teacher Merit Award. And as they're making their way forward, I'm going to put my mask back on. Here we go. And Zach, if we can have them come around this side and help her. No, she's going to come down. She's going to come right down in the front. You can stay right down here on the floor. Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay, I'm going to
Let's get this thing out of the way, couldn't I?
give this first one to Ann, and I'm just going to read as we present to both these awards. Ruggero Piano Teacher Merit Award, presented to Ann B. Scoggin, October 30th, 2020. This award is given annually to teachers who have made a difference in their students' lives, contributed to the advancement of music in their community, and made a significant contribution to RPTA, NCMTA, and/or MTNA. Recipients are nominated by their peers. Congratulations, and thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you so much.
And here, there's a
Beautiful.
little something that goes along with that.
Thank you, thank you.
Next, we're going to bring up Christine.
Get out of the way.
You can just come on, you can come on over this way a little bit, or,
Let's just sit right there, because we don't need to take some pictures.
I'll just get over this way, get out of the way.
and Christine likewise. We present the Ruggero Piano Teacher Merit Award to Christine Albrecht,
Pictures in a minute.
October 30th, 2020. This award is given annually to teachers who have made a difference in their students' lives, contributed to the advancement of music in their community, and made a significant contribution to RPTA, NCMTA, and/or MTNA. Recipients are nominated by their peers. We thank you so much, Christine, for all of your hard work. And
It's on the floor.
did it drop? It did. Here it is. All right. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to step down here. And I get two lovely ladies.
You get to hug us.
I get two lovely ladies to be
You
right
want
next
mask
to you.
us or what? Do we do it
We're-
masked?
We're the three Musketeers. That's right.
Okay.
And this, we have Bonnie up here too.
There's your name.
There's Janine.
We need to have Bonnie up here.
I didn't see her before.
And I'm going to step on this end.
Okay. I'll get
You
it.
ladies can get in the
Christine.
middle.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
I'm grinning, you wouldn't know it.
Yeah, we're smiling big.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, RPTA.
Be careful when you pour it.
Thank you so much, this is great.
Okay, and I guess we're still going. All right, terrific.
This concludes today's lecture as well as the awards. Next Friday from 10 to 12, we have a workshop on the Alexander technique. So be sure to check in for that. And one more thing, check back on the website for the handouts for today's lecture. Thanks and have a great weekend.